I still remember the smell of salt that morning. The way the sea breeze crept through the open window, and carried with it the same whisper I'd heard for 30 years. The whisper of my husband's laughter. The sound of waves brushing against the old wooden deck, the place where my family began. It was my sanctuary. Our beach house. Every nail in its walls had a memory. The sound of my daughter's tiny footsteps echoing down the hall, her giggles as she played hide and seek behind the wicker chairs. The scent of pancakes I used to make on Sunday mornings. Just the way she liked them. With blueberries and too much syrup. I never thought that house would one day feel like a stranger's home. I never thought the child I raised would one day sell it. Behind my back. That morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table, folding her son's little shirts. My grandson's. He was only 6, all curious eyes and questions. He'd been playing with his toy car near the window when I heard her voice behind me. It was calm. Too calm. "Mom," she said. "We're going tomorrow." I smiled, not looking up. "Tomorrow? Where to?" There was a pause. A long one. I remember the way my hands froze mid-fold, the way the air in the room seemed to thicken. "I've sold your beach house," she said. "We're moving out." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. My hearing isn't what it used to be. But when I turned around, she was standing there, perfectly still, arms crossed, her phone in her hand. No trace of guilt. No tremble in her voice. Just cold certainty. I laughed softly, thinking it was one of her jokes. You sold what?" "The beach house," she repeated. "It's done, Mom. The buyer signed yesterday. You should have agreed when I told you we needed the money." I felt my knees weaken. The chair creaked as I sank into it. "The money," I whispered. "My house. Your father built this place with his bare hands. Every stone, every window, every—" "Mom, please don't start." Her voice cut through me like a knife. "Start what?" I cried. "Start remembering how we got here. Start remembering the man who worked himself to death for this place. That's what you call starting." But she just rolled her eyes, sighed, and leaned against the counter, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. For the first time in years, I felt truly small in front of her. My daughter, the same girl who used to hold my hand when thunder frightened her, now looked at me like I was an obstacle. I tried to understand. Maybe she was in trouble. Maybe she needed money desperately. Maybe this was her way of asking for help. So I asked softly, "Why, my child? Why didn't you tell me?" She shrugged. "Because you never listen, Mom. You keep living in the past. This house is too big for you anyway. You're getting old. It's time you let go." Her words felt like stones being dropped into my chest. Too big for me. Too old for me. Too much for me. The same walls that once echoed with lullabies and laughter suddenly echoed with her indifference. I reached out to touch her arm, but she pulled away. And in that small gesture, I realized something terrible. She wasn't just selling the house. She was selling me out of her life. That evening I went to the beach one last time. The sun was low, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The same colors that filled my wedding day. I sat on the sand, watching the waves roll in and break against the shore, and I tried to breathe through the ache in my chest. I thought of my husband, gone 10 years now. I whispered into the wind. Did we fail her? Did I? The wind didn't answer. Only the sea, the same sea that had seen our beginnings, seemed to mourn with me. Behind me I heard her voice again, calling my name sharply. "Mom, come on. Don't make this harder. The buyer's sending a truck tomorrow. We'll take what we can, and they'll handle the rest." "The rest," I repeated quietly. "You mean my life?" She rolled her eyes again, impatient. "It's just a house. Just a house." The words sank into my heart like poison. I looked at her, my only child, and for the first time, I saw her not as my daughter, but as a stranger wearing her face. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked through every room. The kitchen where I taught her to cook, the study where her father used to read her bedtime stories, the balcony where she took her first steps. I touched the walls as if they were skin, trying to memorize the texture of my life before it was erased. In the morning, I stood by the doorway as movers came in. Men I'd never met, strangers handling my memories like furniture. My daughter was on her phone the whole time, laughing, giving instructions, talking about transfer papers and new beginnings. I wanted to scream. But my voice stayed trapped inside me. And when she finally turned to me and said, "Come on, Mom. We're going tomorrow. Everything's arranged," I just nodded. Because deep inside, I knew something she didn't know. Something I had done, quietly, months ago, when I first felt that strange distance in her eyes. She didn't know that the beach house wasn't in her name anymore. She didn't know the papers she'd signed were never ownership documents, but something else entirely. But I stayed silent. Because sometimes, silence is the sharpest weapon a mother can hold. I smiled faintly as I watched her fuss over boxes, believing she'd taken everything from me. She thought she was ending my chapter. But what she didn't know was, I had already written my own ending. When people look at me now, quiet, gray-haired, living in a small rented apartment, they don't see who I used to be. They see an old woman with trembling hands and a tired smile. But once I was someone's whole world. Once, I was a wife, a mother, a dreamer. Our life began small, but full of love. My husband, Daniel, was a carpenter by trade and an artist by heart. He used to say, "Wood breathes if you listen to it right." And I used to watch him from the porch, his hands moving with patience and care, shaping rough timber into beauty. We met when I was 23, a quiet woman who loved books more than people. He was kind, persistent, and had the kind of smile that made you believe in better days. We didn't have much, but we had something people forget to value nowadays: peace. When we built the beach house, we didn't even own a car. Every brick, every nail came from months of saving and working side by side. He'd build through the day, I'd cook for the workers at night. It wasn't just a house. It was a promise, he'd say, "One day, when we're old, we'll sit on that porch and watch our grandchildren run barefoot through the sand." And he was right. We did, for a while. Before the storms came, our daughter, Emma, was born on a rainy night in May. She was tiny, fragile, and the doctor said she had a weak heart at birth. I remember holding her in my arms for the first time, her fingers barely curling around mine, and promising I'd never let anything hurt her. For years, I lived for that promise. I worked extra hours at the bakery, saved every penny for her medicines, her schooling, her dreams. Daniel adored her. He'd carve her wooden toys, a tiny boat, a rocking horse, a dollhouse with little windows that opened. She'd sit on his lap as he worked and ask questions about everything. "Papa, why does wood smell like rain?" "Because," he'd say, smiling, "it remembers the trees it came from." That's how our home felt, alive, rooted, breathing with us. But life has its cruel sense of timing. Daniel passed away just after Emma turned 19. A heart attack, sudden, merciless. One morning he was fixing a door hinge, and by evening he was gone. I remember standing by the sea that night, the waves crashing louder than usual, as if they were mourning with me. Emma was shattered. Or at least, that's what I believed then. She cried for days, clung to me, said she couldn't live without her father. But grief changes people differently. It made me softer. It made her harder. At first, I thought she was coping. She went to university, studied business, made new friends. But slowly, she began to change. Her laughter became shorter, her tone sharper. She started talking about things Daniel never cared for. Status, money, success. "Mom," she'd say, "you don't understand the world now. You can't live on memories." I'd smile gently and answer, "And you can't build happiness out of greed, my love." But she'd roll her eyes, the same way she did years later when she sold the house. That rolling of the eyes, that was where the distance began. Then came Mark, her husband. He was charming in the way that makes you uneasy. Too polite, too practiced. He sold real estate, and he knew exactly how to make people trust him. He called me Mom on the first day we met, brought flowers, complimented the house, said, "This place has value. Real potential." I should have known then what kind of man he was. Emma loved him fiercely. She said he was ambitious. But I saw something else. The way he'd glance around the room as if calculating worth. The way his compliments always came with conditions. One evening, I overheard them whispering on the porch. Mark's voice, low and urgent. "If your mother puts this property in your name, we can invest. Do you realize what it's worth near the shoreline?" And Emma's hesitant reply. "She's sentimental, Mark. This house means everything to her." He sighed. "Then make her see reason." Those words stayed with me for years. Make her see reason. That was when my daughter started calling love, sentiment, and sentiment, weakness. At first, I ignored the signs. A mother always does. I told myself it was normal. Young couples want independence, new priorities. But then, little things began to shift. Emma stopped coming home on weekends. When she did visit, she'd criticize the house. "Mom, why don't you sell this old thing? It's too much for you. You could live in the city with us." I'd laugh softly and say, "And who will take care of your father's roses?" She'd sigh, look away, and say, "They're just flowers, Mom. Just flowers. Just memories. Just a house." It was as if every piece of my life had become an inconvenience to her new world. Still, I helped her whenever she needed it. When she lost her job for a few months, I paid their rent quietly. When they had their first child, I offered to babysit while she returned to work. And when Mark's business started to fail, I lent them money. More than once. Not as a loan, as a mother. I didn't keep track of how much. I only kept track of their gratitude, which faded faster than the seasons. Soon, my generosity became expected. If I hesitated, Emma's voice would sharpen. "You know we're doing this for the family, Mom. Why are you making me feel guilty?" And I'd fold again, guilt pressing down like a hand on my chest. Because in my heart, I still saw the little girl who used to run barefoot on the sand, shouting, "Look, Mama! I found a seashell!" I couldn't connect her to this woman who spoke to me like a burden. The final drift happened quietly, like the tide pulling away. Emma stopped calling me Mum. She started saying, Mother. I became Mother when she needed money advice or childcare. I was Mom only when she wanted something to sound affectionate. One afternoon, I visited their city apartment with a basket of food. Mark met me at the door. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Emma's busy, Mrs. Hall," he said, using my last name for the first time. "We'll come visit next month." I nodded politely, but as I walked away, I saw their window curtains twitch, and her silhouette behind them, pretending not to see me. That was the moment I knew something had broken beyond repair. Months later, she finally came back, with her husband and child, saying they needed a break from the city. I welcomed them with open arms. I cooked their favorite meals, washed their laundry, told bedtime stories to my grandson, and for a brief moment, it felt like I had my family back. Until that morning, when she stood in my kitchen and said, "We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house." Everything that followed. Her cold tone, her silence, her dismissal. It all made sense. It wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was the final act in a play that had been written long ago. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that her father had taught me well. He'd taught me to read people the way he read wood. To hear the cracks before they splintered. And months before she came with her papers, I had already rewritten the story she thought she controlled. After Emma told me she'd sold the house, the world went strangely quiet inside me. It wasn't anger at first, it was disbelief, like I was watching someone else's tragedy unfold in my own kitchen. But denial has a strange way of softening cruelty. It tells you, maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe this will all make sense tomorrow. So that night, I made dinner for everyone as if nothing had happened. Baked salmon, roasted potatoes, and her favorite lemon pie. I wanted to believe that food could heal what words had broken. When I placed the pie on the table, she looked up from her phone and smiled faintly. "You didn't have to, Mom." I smiled back. "I know," I said. "But I wanted to." She didn't notice the tremor in my voice. Or maybe she did, and chose not to care. Her husband Mark poured himself wine and said cheerfully, "You'll see, this is for the best. That old place needed too much work anyway. The market's good right now. We made a smart move." We. That word pierced deeper than he could imagine. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his move to make. That my husband's sweat still lived in those walls. That you can't put a price on memory. But I stayed silent. Because sometimes, silence isn't weakness. It's survival. After dinner, they tucked their son into bed and sat with me on the porch. The sea breeze was gentle that night, but my heart wasn't. Emma leaned forward, her voice suddenly soft. Mom, I know this is hard for you. But you have to trust me. You can stay with us for a while. Until we figure out something better. Stay with you? I asked quietly. Yes, you'll love it. The apartment's small, but cozy. You can have the spare room. I'll take care of everything. I looked at her face, so certain, so organized. Like she was talking about a business transaction, not the uprooting of my life. And the furniture? I asked. Your father's desk. The piano. Mark chuckled. We'll sell the old stuff. Buy you new things when we settle in. Fresh start. Fresh start. Such a pretty phrase for what was really an erasure. That night, when they went to bed, I sat alone by the window, watching the moonlight shimmer on the waves. I thought of the years I had spent building that life. Not just the house, but the love that held it together. How could she trade that for money? For convenience? I pressed my hand against the glass and whispered, Daniel, I wish you were here. You'd know what to do. And for a moment, I imagined his voice. Calm, steady, the way it always was. Listen to the cracks before they break, Mary. The next morning, things began to move fast. Movers came with boxes and paperwork. Mark supervised everything, barking orders, signing forms. Emma busied herself sorting clothes, barely speaking to me except to say, Don't worry, Mom. You'll thank us later. Thank us. Felt like a thorn pressed deeper into my heart. They packed my husband's tools. The ones he'd left in the shed. They packed his fishing rods, his chair, his paintings. Every time I saw something disappear into a box, a piece of me went with it. When they reached his workshop, I finally spoke. Please, I said, my voice trembling, don't touch his things. Not those. Emma looked irritated. Mom. They're old. Half of this stuff is rusted. They're his, I said firmly. Mark sighed. Emma, come on. We'll keep a few things if it makes her happy. But space is limited. That was how they made me feel. Like I was asking for too much just to keep my memories. A few days later, we drove to their city apartment. The car was full, every inch packed with boxes. Emma drove ahead with Mark. I sat in the back with my grandson asleep beside me. When we reached their apartment, my heart sank. It wasn't cozy. It was cramped, dark, suffocating. There was no porch, no sea breeze, no sound of waves, just traffic and noise. My room was barely big enough for a bed and a small dresser. I smiled anyway. It's nice, I said softly. Emma hugged me quickly. It's only temporary, Mom. You'll adjust. But I could already tell, this was not a home. This was a holding space for someone they no longer knew how to love. Days turned into weeks. I cooked, cleaned, and looked after my grandson while they worked long hours. They'd come home late, tired and irritable. Sometimes I'd overhear them arguing in their room. Mark's voice would rise first. Your mother's in the way, Emma. We can't keep living like this. And she'd whisper back, just a few more weeks. Let me handle it. That's what I had become. A situation to be managed. One evening, she came home from work and handed me a form. Mom, can you sign this? It's just a confirmation for the property sale. The legal closure. I took the papers, my fingers tracing the lines. I had learned long ago to read everything before signing. Daniel had made me promise that after he was gone, I'd never trust signatures blindly. So I read carefully. And there it was. A clause about transfer of remaining proceeds to her and Mark's joint account. My heart pounded. Emma, I said softly, this isn't just confirmation. It transfers everything. She frowned. Mom, please don't make this difficult. It's just formality, the lawyer said. Which lawyer? I interrupted. Mark's uncle. He handled the whole thing. I looked at her. My daughter, educated, successful, beautiful, and realized she was either blind to his manipulation or complicit in it. And I couldn't decide which hurt more. That night, I hid the papers under my pillow. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face. He had trusted me to guard what we built. And now, that trust was being tested. By morning, I made a decision. I went to the bank quietly, withdrew what little savings I had left, and called an old friend. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years. His name was Henry Lawson, Daniel's former business partner. He was the one who helped us register the property decades ago. He still remembered me. When I told him what was happening, he sighed deeply. "Mary, you did the right thing calling me. Don't sign anything until we meet." That was the day the tide began to turn, quietly, invisibly, under the surface. But at home, things grew colder. Emma noticed my distance. She'd ask, "Are you angry with me?" And I'd smile softly, "No, my love. Just tired." She mistook my silence for surrender. Mark mistook my calm for weakness, and so they pushed further. A week later, Mark announced that he'd found a buyer for my husband's workshop tools. "It's good money," he said cheerfully. "We'll split it 3 ways." 3 ways? I asked, surprised. "Yes, me, Emma, and you. It's only fair." Fair, he used the word like a shield. I nodded, but inside I knew. Fairness wasn't part of their language anymore. They spoke the dialect of greed, smooth, persuasive, and hollow. Slowly, I began to notice how Emma's tone changed whenever money entered the conversation. She became sharper, more commanding. Her husband's words seemed to live in her mouth now. "Mom, you don't need so many clothes. Mom, why do you keep that jewelry locked away? You never wear it. What's the point?" At first, I thought she was teasing. Until the day she asked me directly, "Can I have your emerald ring? The one Dad gave you. It'll look perfect with my dress for the gala." I looked at the ring, the last piece of him I wore daily. And for the first time, I said, "No." The silence that followed was icy. She forced a smile and said, "Of course. I just thought you'd want me to have something of his." But her eyes told another story, one of resentment, calculation, and control. The days that followed felt endless. Her kindness turned to condescension. Her respect turned to duty. Every small act of defiance from me, cooking without asking, keeping the window open too long, turning off a light, was met with a sigh or a sharp remark. Once, she even said, "Mom, sometimes I feel like I'm raising you." I looked at her quietly, swallowing tears. If only she knew, she wasn't raising me. She was breaking me. And yet, I still loved her. That's the cruelty of motherhood. Even betrayal can't kill the instinct to protect. I prayed for her every night. That she would wake up, see what she'd become. But prayers, I've learned, don't always change people. Sometimes they just give you the strength to change yourself. When Henry called again a few days later, he told me something that nearly stopped my heart. "Mary, I checked the registry. You're still the sole owner of the property. The documents they have are forged. They won't hold in court." I sat in silence, gripping the phone. "So they think they sold it?" I whispered. "But they didn't." "Exactly?" he said. "Let them think what they want for now. We'll prepare everything quietly." I thanked him through tears. For the first time in months, I felt the faintest spark of power return to my chest. A small flame of justice waiting for its moment. I looked at my sleeping grandson that night, his face peaceful and innocent. And I made another promise, not to let greed steal his memories of kindness. Whatever happened next, I would make sure truth had the final word. When you give your entire life to someone, you don't expect them to hand it back to you in pieces. But that's exactly what my daughter did. The days following her confession about selling the beach house felt like walking through fog. Every step uncertain, every breath heavy. I would wake up and forget for a moment, just a brief, merciful moment, that my home, my sanctuary, was gone. Then the truth would settle back in like a cold wind seeping through broken windows. The house had been sold. My memories had been priced, negotiated, and signed away. I called my lawyer, Mr. Hanley, a soft-spoken man who had handled my late husband's estate years ago. "Can it be reversed?" I asked him, my voice trembling. "She didn't have the right. I didn't sign anything." He sighed on the other end. "Margaret, the deed was in both your names." She had legal access. Unless you can prove coercion or mental incapacity, there's not much we can do. Mental incapacity. It stung, like he was saying I'd gone senile. Maybe that's what they all thought. Maybe that's what Emily told them to make it easier to betray me. I hung up the phone and sat at my kitchen table. There was a single photograph lying there, of Emily at age 6, holding a tiny sand bucket by the ocean. Her hair was tangled from the wind, her face sunburnt, but her smile. Oh, that smile, it was pure. That's the child I raised. That's the child I lost. A week later, a moving truck pulled into the driveway of the beach house. I hadn't even been given time to pack everything. Emily and her husband, Richard, stood by, directing the movers. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it already is," she said, crossing her arms. "Harder?" I whispered, stepping closer. "You took the only place that ever felt like home to me, Emily. Do you have any idea what that means?" She sighed, impatient, cold. "You'll be comfortable at the retirement condo. You won't have to worry about maintenance, bills, or driving all the way out here. It's for your own good, my own good." Those words have broken more hearts than bullets ever could. When I arrived at the condo she had arranged for me, it felt like a hospital, sterile, colorless, and lifeless. The staff greeted me with polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. My room was small, a twin bed, a dresser, a single window facing a parking lot. I sat on the bed, clutching my purse, feeling like an unwanted guest in my own life. That night I called her again. "Emily, I need to talk to you. Please, come see me." She hesitated before replying. "I'm busy, Mom. Maybe next week. Richard has meetings, and the baby's sick again." I stayed silent. "Mom," she said, her tone softer now. "Please, don't make this dramatic. It's just a house. Just a house." That sentence echoed through me for hours after the call ended. That house had been my world. The place where my husband's laughter still lived in the walls. Where Emily took her first steps. Where I buried my tears after he passed. It wasn't just a house. It was everything I had left of love. A few weeks later, I learned the real reason she sold it. Not for convenience. Not for my comfort. But for money. Her husband's new business venture had failed. They were drowning in debt, and she had used my property to save themselves. A neighbor, an old friend named Claire, came to visit me secretly. She sat by my bedside and whispered, "Maggie, they didn't just sell it for you. They sold it because of you. They said you were too emotional to handle the truth." I stared at her, my hands trembling. "You're saying they used me?" Claire nodded sadly. "The papers said the funds were transferred directly to Richard's account. Not yours." I couldn't breathe. My world tilted. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I whispered, "I raised her better than that." Claire took my hand. People change when money whispers louder than love. The following morning, I went to visit the house. Or what used to be my house. It wasn't mine anymore, but I needed to see it. When I got there, the new owners were moving in. A young couple with 2 little boys, laughing as they carried boxes inside. The sound of their joy cut through me like glass. I stood at the edge of the yard watching. The mother noticed me and smiled kindly. "Are you lost?" she asked. "No," I said softly. "I used to live here." "Oh," she said, her smile fading a little. "It's a beautiful home. We fell in love with it the moment we saw it. The previous owners said it belonged to an older woman who wanted to move to the city. Wanted to." The lie was so clean, so effortless. I turned away before she could say more. As I walked back to the bus stop, my knees buckled, and I sat down on the bench, crying silently. At the condo, I began to fade, days blurred into nights. I stopped eating, stopped talking much to anyone. The nurses noticed. "Mrs. Harris, you need to keep your strength up," one said kindly as she placed a tray in front of me. I nodded without looking up. But inside, I felt hollow. I would stare at the window for hours, remembering the sound of waves crashing against the shore, the scent of salt and wet sand, the laughter that once filled the air. Now, all I had was the hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant. Sometimes I thought about calling Emily again. But I didn't know what to say anymore. I wanted to forgive her. Truly, I did. But forgiveness feels impossible when the wound is still bleeding. One afternoon, I received a letter. It wasn't from Emily. She had stopped writing by then. But from the local real estate office. It was a notice of capital gains tax on the property she had sold. But my name was still partially attached to. I was responsible for the taxes. That was the day I realized how deep her betrayal went. Not only had she taken my home, but she had left me with the financial burden of losing it. That night, I cried. Truly cried. For the first time in years. Not the quiet tears of disappointment or sadness, but the kind of crying that shakes your whole body, that leaves your throat raw and your eyes swollen. And in those tears, I found a strange kind of clarity. Because when someone breaks you so completely, you either stay shattered, or you start to rebuild. The next morning, I did something unexpected. I put on my best blue dress. The one my husband used to say made me look like the sky before rain. And I went for a walk. The world outside felt different. Every tree, every breeze, every sound felt like it was whispering, "You're still here." And as I walked past a small bookstore, I saw a poster in the window, Legal Aid for Seniors, free consultations. Something in me stirred. I walked in. A young woman greeted me warmly. "Are you here for the legal clinic?" "Yes," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "Yes, I am." She led me to a small office where a volunteer lawyer listened to my story. His expression changed from polite curiosity to deep concern. "Mrs. Harris," he said finally, "if what you're saying is true, this might qualify as financial abuse. We can help you file a claim." Financial abuse. The words felt heavy but right. For the first time since losing everything, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not vengeance, but strength. That night, I sat by my window in the condo, staring at the moonlight reflecting off the parking lot. I thought about Emily. My little girl with the sand bucket and crooked smile. Where had she gone? But I also thought about me. The woman who had once been strong enough to raise a child alone, to rebuild after loss, to love after grief. Maybe that woman wasn't gone after all. Maybe she had just been sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake up. And that night, she finally did. When you spend your whole life giving, you forget what it feels like to fight for yourself. That night, after meeting the lawyer at the small bookstore clinic, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, tracing the faint lines on my palms. Those hands had raised a daughter, cooked meals for 20 years, scrubbed floors, stitched clothes, and buried a husband. But they had never once lifted themselves up in defense. That was about to change. The next morning, I returned to the legal aid office. The young woman from before, her name was Lydia, recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Harris, you came back," she said, her smile warm and genuine. "I did," I replied, straightening my shawl. "I've spent too long letting others speak for me. I think it's time I tell my own story." She led me into the small conference room again. It smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. Sitting there was the same volunteer lawyer, Mr. D'Angelo, a man in his 40s with thoughtful eyes. He looked up and nodded. "I was hoping you'd return." I placed my hands on the table. "I'm ready to fight this." He explained everything clearly, every step, every risk. "We'll need proof," he said. "Bank statements, sale agreements, any communication that shows your daughter acted without your informed consent." I hesitated. She said it was a joint decision. That I wanted this. "Did you sign anything?" I shook my head. "No." She told me she'd handle the paperwork. I trusted her. He leaned back. "Then that's our starting point." For the next hour, we went through every document I could recall. My memory wasn't perfect, but grief sharpened certain details. The colors of envelopes, the date she made me sign, something without showing me, the way she avoided eye contact afterward. All of it came flooding back. Lydia scribbled notes. Mr. D'Angelo nodded quietly. "Mrs. Harris, this isn't just about a house. It's about your rights. Your daughter may have committed fraud." Fraud. The word hung in the air like thunder. I sat there, clutching my bag, my breath uneven. It hurt to hear, but it also freed me. Because naming something gives you power over it. Over the next few weeks, Lydia helped me gather evidence. She printed bank statements, requested property records, and contacted witnesses. When I went through the paperwork with her, I saw it. My daughter's signature, bold and deliberate, right under my forged one. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at it, the shape of my name copied so perfectly it almost fooled me. Lydia reached over gently. "Are you okay?" I smiled through tears. "Yes. I think I finally am. Because now, the truth wasn't buried under guilt or confusion. It was there, in ink." Meanwhile, Emily had no idea I knew. She still called occasionally, pretending to be caring. "Hi, Mom," she'd chirp. "How's the condo? Do you like the food there?" "I'm fine." I'd answer, calm and measured. "How are you?" "Oh, busy." "Richard's business is picking up again, thank God." I'd nod silently, even though she couldn't see me. She thought I was still the weak, grieving woman she could control. She didn't know that I'd been quietly building a case, that I'd found a team willing to stand by me. There's a certain peace in pretending to be powerless when you're not. One afternoon, Lydia came to visit me at the condo. She carried a folder thick with documents. "Mrs. Harris," she said, sitting across from me, "we've got everything we need to file the petition. The case will be about financial exploitation and fraudulent property sale. It'll be tough but winnable." I took a deep breath. "Then let's do it." She smiled. "You're brave." "You know that." I shook my head softly. "No. I'm just a mother who finally learned what it means to stop forgiving what shouldn't be forgiven." When the legal notice was served to Emily, she called me within minutes. "Mom, what is this?" she shouted. Her voice, once sweet and pleading, now dripped with anger. "A lawsuit? Against your own daughter?" I held the phone close, breathing slowly. "Yes, Emily. Against my daughter. Against the woman who forged my name and sold my husband's house." There was silence on the line. The kind that exposes guilt. She scoffed finally. "You don't know what you're doing. Richard said you're being manipulated. Those lawyers just want your money." I smiled faintly. "Funny," I said. "I don't have much money left for anyone to want. But I still have truth. And that's enough." She hung up. I expected tears, shaking, maybe regret. But I felt something I hadn't in years. Calm. The kind of calm that comes when you stop being afraid. A few days later, I met with Lydia again. She handed me a cup of tea. And as we reviewed the case, she said quietly, "You remind me of my grandmother. She went through something similar, trusted her son with everything, and he nearly took it all." I looked at her. "What did she do?" Lydia smiled sadly. "She forgave him eventually, but she never forgot. Forgiveness. That word used to mean surrender to me, but now, it felt different. It wasn't about letting someone hurt you again. It was about refusing to carry their sin inside you anymore. Maybe one day I'd reach that point. But first, I needed justice. As the case progressed, rumors began to circle. The condo staff whispered, the neighbors speculated, and even the church ladies started to avoid me. "Is it true?" one of them asked one Sunday. "You're suing your daughter?" "Yes," I said simply. Her eyes widened. "Oh my, that must be hard." "It is," I said. "But living without dignity is harder." She didn't know how to respond, so she just nodded and walked away. That night, I sat alone in my small room, thinking about how the world often expects women like me to stay quiet, polite, forgiving, no matter how cruelly we're treated. But silence is its own kind of death. The hearing date was set for mid-May. I remember standing in front of the mirror that morning, wearing a simple navy dress and pearl earrings. My husband's favorite. "Wish me strength," I whispered to his photograph on the nightstand. "You always said I was the brave one. I hope you were right." When I arrived at the courthouse, Lydia met me at the entrance. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. "As ready as a mother can be to face her child in court," I replied. We walked in together. Emily was already there, sitting beside Richard, looking pale and furious. When our eyes met, she looked away quickly. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Lydia presented the documents, the deed, the forged signature, the bank transfers, the testimony from Claire. Each piece of evidence was another crack in the wall Emily had built around her lies. Her lawyer tried to defend her, saying I had memory lapses, and had verbally agreed to everything. But when the judge asked me directly, Mrs. Harris, did you ever authorize this sale? I looked at Emily, my only child, and said, steady and clear, no, Your Honor. I trusted my daughter. And she used that trust to steal from me. For a moment, Emily's mask broke. Her eyes glistened. But she quickly looked down, pretending to read something. During a recess, I stepped outside to catch my breath. The spring air was soft, scented with jasmine from a nearby garden. Lydia joined me. You did beautifully, she said. I smiled faintly. It hurts, I admitted. But it's a clean kind of hurt. Like a wound that's finally healing. She nodded. You're not just fighting for yourself, Mrs. Harris. You're fighting for every woman who's been silenced by her own family. Her words struck deep. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was bigger than me. The trial stretched on for weeks. Every day felt like walking barefoot over glass. But I kept going. Because I had already lost everything once. There was nothing left to fear. And then, one morning, something unexpected happened. Emily came to see me privately before the final hearing. She looked tired, her eyes red. She sat down across from me in the courthouse lounge. Mom, she whispered. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I said nothing. Tears filled her eyes. We were desperate. Richard's business was collapsing. I thought I could fix it and buy the house back later. I didn't think it would hurt you like this. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And for a moment, I saw that same little girl again, holding her sand bucket by the sea. I would have given you everything if you'd just asked, I said softly. But you didn't ask, Emily. You took? She covered her face, sobbing. I'm sorry, Mom. I know, I said. But sorry doesn't bring back what you sold. Or the trust you broke. The bailiff called us back in. She wiped her tears and walked ahead of me. That final day in court felt strangely peaceful. The truth had already been spoken. Now, it was just waiting to be acknowledged. When the judge read the verdict, my hands trembled. He ruled in my favor, citing fraudulent misrepresentation and unauthorized sale. The court ordered restitution of funds and penalties against her husband for coercion and forgery. I closed my eyes as tears streamed down my cheeks. It wasn't about winning. It was about being heard. For the first time in years, my voice mattered again. After court, Emily tried to speak to me. But I couldn't yet. Not out of hatred. But because healing requires distance. Instead, I walked outside, letting the sunlight touch my face. I breathed deeply, feeling the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. The air smelled like freedom. Over the next few months, I moved into a small cottage near the countryside. Nothing fancy, just quiet and green. Lydia helped me find it. There was a small garden out front, and every morning, I'd water the roses and talk to the wind, imagining my husband's voice teasing me gently like he used to. Sometimes, I thought about Emily. I wondered if she'd learned, if she'd changed. I didn't hate her. I couldn't. She was still my daughter. But love doesn't mean allowing someone to destroy you. Love means wishing them peace, from a safe distance. One evening Lydia came to visit. We sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in gold. She smiled. You've come a long way, Mrs. Harris. I nodded. I have. I used to think I'd die of heartbreak. But now I realize heartbreak isn't the end. It's just a lesson in disguise. We sat in silence for a while, watching the last light fade. I thought of everything I'd lost. My home, my daughter's trust, and everything I'd gained: clarity, strength, peace. The sea was gone, but I could still hear its whisper in the wind. And maybe that was enough. There's a strange kind of silence that follows justice. Not the soft silence of peace, but the heavy one that comes when the truth finally echoes through every room where lies once lived. The court's decision had been made. My daughter, Emily, was found guilty of fraudulent property sale and financial coercion. The beach house, the place where my husband's laughter still lived, was legally ordered to return to my name. But even victory can taste bitter when it's flavored with heartbreak. The day I went to reclaim the keys, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. The drive to the coast took nearly 2 hours. The roads were lined with fields of golden grass swaying gently under the afternoon sun. I rolled down the window, letting the salty wind brush my face. For a moment, I was 20 again. Young, barefoot, standing beside my husband, dreaming of a life we'd one day build together. When the realtor handed me the keys, I just stared at them. The metal glimmered in my palm, small, ordinary, yet it held everything I'd lost and fought for. "Congratulations, Mrs. Harris," she said softly. "It's yours again." I smiled faintly. It always was. When I stepped inside, the air smelled different, like fresh paint and unfamiliar perfume. The new owners had left. Their furniture was gone, but traces of their life lingered. I walked slowly through each room. The living room where Emily took her first steps. The kitchen where my husband used to hum old songs while brewing coffee. The back porch where we'd watch the sunset after long days. I touched the walls, the railings, the windowsills, whispering, "I'm home." But when I reached the master bedroom, I stopped. It felt colder there, emptier. I opened the closet and found something folded neatly on the shelf, a single photo frame. It was an old family picture. Me, my husband, and Emily. Taken 20 years ago. She must have left it behind. For the first time since the verdict, tears slipped down my face. Not of anger, but grief for what could have been. Because even after everything, a mother's heart never stops aching for her child. The following week, I started cleaning the house. Not just the dust, but the memories. I polished the wood floors, repainted the walls, and opened every window to let the sea breeze chase out the heaviness. Each day felt like reclaiming a small piece of myself. Neighbors would stop by occasionally, surprised to see me back. "Margaret, is it true?" one of them asked. "You won the case." I nodded. She smiled. "Good for you. Not many women your age would have fought that battle." I laughed softly. I didn't fight because I wanted revenge. I fought because I wanted to remember who I was before the world made me doubt myself. And it was true. This wasn't about punishing Emily anymore. It was about finding the strength I'd misplaced somewhere between motherhood and heartbreak. A few weeks later, I received a letter. The handwriting was shaky, familiar. It was from Emily. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. The truth is, after the verdict, everything fell apart. Richard left me. He said I ruined everything. Maybe I did. I don't expect you to ever trust me again, but I wanted you to know that I understand now. I see what I did. I hurt you because I was desperate. And in doing so, I became someone I can't even recognize. If you never want to see me again, I'll understand. But I hope you're okay. You deserve peace, Mom. More than anyone I know. Love, Emily." I read it twice. Then 3 times. Tears blurred the ink. That night, I sat by the fireplace holding the letter close. Forgiveness wasn't something I could offer easily. Not yet. But her words, they were a beginning. 2 months later, Emily showed up at my doorstep. It was early morning. The sky was still painted in hues of pink and silver. I opened the door and froze. She looked older, thinner, pale, her once styled hair tied loosely, eyes swollen from crying. She clutched her coat like it was armor. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. For a long moment, I just looked at her. The wind whistled between us. "Why are you here?" I asked softly. "I didn't come to ask for anything. I just wanted to see you, one last time." Her voice cracked. "I lost everything, Mom. Richard's gone. The money's gone. House. Yours. It's gone too. I don't even know who I am anymore." I felt something shift in my chest. That old instinct to protect her, to comfort her. But I stayed still. "Emily," I said quietly, "you didn't lose who you are. You just forgot for a while. And now, you're paying the price for the forgetting." She looked down, her lips trembling. "I was so stupid." "Yes," I said honestly. "But stupidity can be healed. Cruelty cannot. And you still have a heart, even if it's broken." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." I stepped closer and placed my hand on her cheek. "I know. But sorry doesn't rebuild trust. It only opens the door for it to start." She nodded, weeping silently. For a long time, we stood there, mother and daughter, broken and mending in the same breath. I didn't invite her in that day. It wasn't out of anger, but out of wisdom. Healing needs boundaries, and love needs time to breathe again. But before she left, I handed her something. It was a small seashell. One she had collected as a child on that same beach decades ago. "Take it," I said. "So you remember where you come from. And so you remember that home isn't something you can sell." She pressed it to her chest, crying softly. "I'll never forget, Mom." Then she turned and walked down the path, her figure shrinking in the golden light. I watched her until she disappeared beyond the dunes. That night, I walked to the shore. The waves lapped gently against my feet, cool and rhythmic. The stars shimmered above, like tiny promises of peace. I closed my eyes and spoke into the wind. "I forgive you, Emily." The words were quiet, barely audible, but they felt enormous. Not for her, but for me. Because forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about letting the other person off the hook. It's about cutting the rope that's been strangling your own heart. And in that moment, I felt free. The weeks turned into months. Life began to find its rhythm again. I started volunteering at a small coastal community center, teaching art classes to elderly women. We painted seascapes and sunsets, our laughter echoing through the hall. One of the ladies, Ruth, once asked, "Margaret, do you ever miss her?" "Your daughter." I smiled sadly. "Every day," I said, "but I've learned that love doesn't always mean closeness. Sometimes it just means wishing them well, wherever they are." Ruth nodded, her eyes misty. "That's the hardest kind of love." "Yes," I whispered. "But also the purest." One afternoon, while cleaning the porch, I found something tucked under the doormat. A small envelope with my name written on it. Inside was a note: "Mom, I've started working again. Nothing fancy, but it's honest. I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. Not for forgiveness, but because I want to be someone you'd be proud of again. Love always, Emily." I smiled through tears. For the first time in years, hope felt real, fragile, but alive. That night, I lit a candle in the window. When Emily was little, I used to do that whenever my husband traveled. A symbol that home was waiting, that love never closed its door completely. I did the same now. The candle flickered softly in the sea breeze, glowing against the night. Not an invitation, but a message. That healing was possible, even after everything. Months later I saw her again. She came quietly one Sunday morning, carrying flowers. "I didn't know if you'd still be here," she said. I smiled. "I told you once, Emily, this house isn't just mine, it's our story. Every mistake, every memory, every lesson, it all lives here." We sat together on the porch, drinking tea. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was gentle, forgiving. "Do you think we can start over?" she asked timidly. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "We already have." And for the first time in years we laughed. Really laughed. It wasn't the same laughter we once shared. It was softer, wiser, and infinitely more precious. That evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, I walked down to the water one last time. The waves whispered against the shore, just as they always had. I thought about the years. The pain, the betrayal, the courage it took to rise again. And as the tide washed over my feet, I realized something simple, but profound: you can lose everything. Your home, your trust, your heart. And still find your way back to peace. Because peace doesn't come from people, it comes from truth. And once you live in truth, no one can take your home away again. The beach house stood behind me, glowing in the soft orange light. The sound of gulls, the scent of salt, the endless whisper of the ocean. All of it felt like forgiveness made visible. I smiled, whispering into the wind, "Thank you, life, for breaking me just enough to rebuild me stronger." It's been 2 years since that day in court. 2 long, tender years of learning how to live again. Quietly, peacefully, and on my own terms. I still wake up early. Old habits die hard. The sea breeze finds me before the sun does. My little garden is full now of marigolds, lavender, and white roses. The same flowers my husband once promised he'd plant for me by the beach. But now they bloom outside my small cottage in the hills. No, it isn't the same beach house. That one is gone. But I've come to understand something deeper: peace doesn't come from owning walls or windows. It comes from owning yourself. After everything that happened, the lies, the betrayal, the courtroom, I thought my heart would never heal. For months, I couldn't even look at family photos without feeling that dull ache behind my ribs. The kind that makes you want to go back in time just to warn your old self, don't trust so easily. But pain, if you sit with it long enough, begins to whisper the truth. At first, that truth sounded cruel. It said, you were used. Then, it softened, but you survived. I started to rebuild piece by piece. The settlement money wasn't much. Most of it went into legal fees and repairs for my little rental home. But what I truly gained couldn't be measured in coins. I gained clarity. I gained the right to say, no. I gained the strength to live without fear of being alone. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I light a candle and sit by the window. I can hear the faint hum of waves from miles away. I imagine my old beach house, not as it was, but as it felt. The laughter of my husband, the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings, the sound of my daughter's small feet running down the hall when she was little. Those memories are still mine. No one can sell them. No one can take them. Last month, something unexpected happened. I received a letter, no return address. Just my name, written in that familiar looping handwriting. It was from her, from my daughter. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of years that letter carried. Inside, she wrote, Mom, I don't know how to begin. I've lost everything. Mark left me. The house, the money, the friends. They all disappeared when he did. I'm living in a small apartment now, trying to find work. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope you're happy. I hope you found peace. I think about you every day. Love, Lily. When I finished reading, tears rolled down my cheeks. But they weren't angry tears anymore. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my journal. Then I whispered, I forgive you. Not because she asked for it, but because holding on to pain had already cost me enough. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what they did. It's about remembering who you are. And I am not a victim. I am a woman who walked through fire and didn't let it burn her soul. One afternoon, as I was tending to my garden, I saw a car pull up outside my gate. It was her. Older, thinner, eyes red from the kind of crying that leaves you hollow. She stood there holding a small box. My seashell collection, Mom, she said softly, almost like a question. For a moment, I froze. The air between us was heavy with things unsaid. Years of anger, silence, and longing. Then, something in me shifted. I opened the gate. She walked toward me, slowly, cautiously, as if afraid I might turn away. When she reached me, she handed me the box and said, I kept them all. I thought I'd give them back someday. I just didn't know when. I took the box. The shells rattled gently. Little echoes of the past. I looked at her, my daughter, my child. The one I had fed, held and once believed would protect me in old age. And then I saw it, the regret in her eyes. Real raw human regret. I didn't say much. I just placed my hand on her cheek and whispered, Come in. You must be tired. She cried then, not the loud, dramatic kind of crying, but the kind that comes from the soul. We sat in silence for a while. No apologies, no explanations. Just two women, broken in different ways, trying to find their way back to love. I made tea. She smiled faintly and said, Still too sweet, Mom. I laughed. Some things never change. She didn't stay long that day. But when she left, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Lightness. Maybe we'll never go back to what we were. But maybe we don't need to. Maybe love, when it grows older, doesn't demand perfection. It just asks for presence. Now, every morning, I walk down to the small beach near my new home. It's nothing like the grand old one, but it's enough. I take one of those seashells she returned to me, hold it to my ear, and listen to the sea's eternal hum. It reminds me that everything in life comes in waves. Joy, sorrow, betrayal, healing. You can't stop the tide, but you can learn to float. And I have. The neighbors sometimes ask why I live alone when I have family. I smile and say, because solitude is not the absence of love. It's where love learns to breathe again. They don't always understand, but that's all right. I no longer need everyone to. Some nights, I write letters I'll never send. To my husband, to my daughter, to the woman I used to be. I tell them that I'm proud. Proud that I didn't give up. Proud that I learned the difference between being kind and being used. I think about that day when she said, "We're going tomorrow, Mom. I've sold your beach house." It used to be the sentence that broke me. Now it's just the sentence that changed me. I've learned that love, real love, doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't trade your peace for someone else's comfort. And when someone shows you who they are, you believe them the first time, but you also remember that forgiveness is for you, not for them. If I've learned anything from my story, it's this. True freedom isn't walking away from others. It's walking back home to yourself. The other night, I lit a candle and watched the flame dance gently against the dark. I thought of Lily again, wherever she is. I whispered, "May you find what I found, not money, not houses, but peace." Then I blew out the candle, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. The sea kept whispering outside, steady and soft, as if to say, "You made it, dear one. You made it." Life will test you with the people you love most. Some will take from you, some will betray you, and some will come back broken. But remember, your worth is not measured by how much you give others. It's measured by how gently you rise after being shattered. True love cannot be bought, and freedom is worth any price. And you? What would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven, or walked away forever? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.